Everybody has like that defining moment that shifts so much in their life. And mine happened when I was about 21 years old. I was running my own professional speaker management agency, and it was a ball. We had a lot of fun. And so I went out of town for about 2 weeks. And when you come back in town, you're trying to just decompress. And so before I ran home, I went by the grocery stores to get a little bit of groceries. And I was single, not married, no kids, nothing. So, very carefree life, if you will. So, anyways, I go get my groceries. I go to the cashier's, and he tells me that my card is declining. And that was like, what? That moment where you're thinking, no, I got money in my account, my card shouldn't be declining. So I give him another card, thinking something may have happened with the first one. Then the second one declined, and then the third one declined. And by that point, you know how it is. Or maybe you don't, I don't know. But when people are in line, they're looking at you, and you're feeling embarrassed, you're feeling self-conscious, wondering what is going on, thinking something's wrong with maybe their machine. And in that moment, though, I knew something was off. I didn't have credit cards at the time. I knew something had to be going on if all my cards were declining. So obviously I go to the bank. And before I can get out the car, the bank manager, who knew me very well, came running out. And he was like, Kim, you got to come and talk to me. We've been waiting, for me to come back in. And so I go in his office, and he sits down, and I'm like, what's going on? I said, I can't use my cards. I can't buy anything. And he said, our fraud department contacted me, and we believe your account has been fraudulently being in use. And I was like, well, how's that happen? And so he said, well, I don't know. He said, but let me say this. This is not like $100 or $200 or $300 situation. This is thousands, and not even one or two thousands, like five figures. And all your accounts are just being hit left and right. And they're coming in so fast that our fraud department was immediately alerted, although transactions were still trying to process. And I'm sitting here like, I don't even understand what you're talking about, kind of thing, And one of the things that they knew that obviously it wasn't me is because the signature on the checks weren't mine. And we talked for a while, and it was one of those moments, if you've ever had, where your mind kind of goes out. That person's talking, and it sounds like that Charlie Brown wonk, wonk, wonk. Like you're seeing the lips move, but you don't really process everything. That's what I was going through in that moment. And I remember saying I just needed to take a breath and leave. And when I got to the car, I realized I had no gas. And it was a very humbling moment, because I had to go back in and humbly ask for some gas money. And he was so kind. He was so kind. And I was glad that I went back in there, because he said, if you have a moment, I want you to really look at the signature and see if there's anybody close to you, anybody you may recognize. And in my head in that moment, I couldn't think of anybody that would do that to me. I couldn't even think of why someone would want to do that. I didn't have a ton of money. I was literally new in growing my business. And at that time, when you were part of a speaker agency, a lot of times whenever speakers worked with you, they pay you a percentage. And the companies that hired them would always send you the paycheck as the agency. So a lot of the money that was stolen was a lot of my clients' money. And so, of course, I'm just feeling sick and trying to figure out what to do. So in that moment, he had me look at all the checks. And he said, here's the thing. We know that these were computer generated. They were not generated by a bank. This is someone who probably bought some software somewhere. They took your account number and your routing number, and they created their own checks, because all the checks were like typed out as if on a computer. And when I really had a time to look at the signatures, in that moment I knew. And it was one of those surreal moments where I started looking at all the signatures, and I realized who it was. And I felt numb. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know even how to utter a sound, if you will. And in that moment, he said, "You know who it is?" And I said, "I do." And even in that, I still couldn't believe that what I believe now to be true. And so he, informed me how to contact the police and how to start that process, because the bank really couldn't do a provisional credit, because it wasn't like a few $100s, even $1,000. Like I said, it was about five figures worth of stuff that was coming in. This person wrote deposit checks for a condo, for a trip, a down payment, on all kind of things. It was insane. And when I got back to my car and I went home, I still couldn't even cry. I couldn't even say anything. It just hit me like a ton of bricks that this person who worked with me every single day, She was one of my team members. We shared a small little office. I didn't have a whole lot in the beginning, and every day, 8 to 10 hours a day, we worked side by side for a year. But in that moment, as I was walking up to my apartment and finally had a chance to close the door, and it just hit me, and I just cried, literally sitting by the front door, like, what in the hell am I going to do? It was in that moment where it seemed like all the signs that sometimes we tend to miss started flooding in that moment. In the previous year, when I met this person, I had met them actually a couple of years prior to that. Let me share that. But in that year leading up to this moment, I remember one time she came into the office and she was so excited because her bank had given her a letter, and she brought it to me, and there was another lady working with me part-time, and they were congratulating her on not writing overdraft checks. And I thought that was the weirdest thing in the world. I didn't even know banks wrote congratulatory letters on that kind of thing. And I just kind of chalked it up to, that's a weird thing, not even realizing, okay, Kim, pause. Maybe there's something wrong if a bank is writing someone a congratulatory letter about not writing, overdrafting their account often. And then a couple months after that, I met her fiance, and by the time this situation happened, he left her. But he was a bank manager, and we all went out to dinner just hanging out. And when she went to the restroom, he said, "You seem like a very savvy person." He goes, "Let me just let you know, I love my lady here. However, don't let her near anything financial in your life. She has some issues she's working through. Just don't let her close to anything." And even in that, to be honest with you, I was like, okay, no big deal, because I don't let her near anything, so I'm going to chalk it up. And then my third and final warning was from her own mother, who gave me a nice warning too. And when I left to go on my trip for 2 weeks, nothing could have prepared me for even thinking that someone was going to do that. When I left, what I left her was with her paycheck, and it was written. I never thought in a million years that someone would take the account numbers and the routing number and go and create something. And when I realized who it was and I tried to reach out to her, of course, her line was disconnected. Nobody can find her. Her mother was so amazing, and just apologetic, and was like, I'll do whatever I can. Her ex-fiance was the same way. Everybody was really, really amazing. But let me say this to you. For me, in that moment, I fell into probably one of the worst periods of my life of depression, because in my mind, it wasn't just so much what was done to me as it was that I have all these clients that I got to pay, and I had no money. I didn't even know how to get gas day to day. It got so bad for the first week or so where I didn't even want to see the sunlight. When I would come home from the office, whatever, I would put like blankets literally on the windows, because I did not even want to know when literally day turned into night and night turned back into day. It's just I did not want to function. And so eventually I called my family and told them what happened. And at that time, the young Kim, I kept everything in. And they knew I was getting ready to explode. And by their grace, they came up and I shared with them everything that happened, and they gave me some seed money to get through. But even in that, I've always been so fiercely independent. And so in that moment, I'm like, oh my God, I'm having to get money from my parents. It was just so much. And when they left, I still fell back into another period of depression. And a very good friend of mine came knocking on my door one night. And if you've ever seen those movies where there's someone standing outside the door saying, if you don't let me in, I'm not going to go anywhere. Well, that actually happened to me. She refused to leave unless I opened up the door. And when I did, I just cried. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to function. And she was like, you're going to come live with me. And I was like, oh, no. And I loved her to death. But at that time, her sister was living with her. Her best friend was living with her. And she was very honest. She was like, I don't have a bedroom for you. I have a couch. And I need you to live with us for a little while so you can heal. And in that season, I was reluctant at first, but I did. I broke my lease, which I wouldn't suggest to anyone, but I did at the time. My manager and them were really kind. They didn't even put it on my credit. I told them what happened, and they were very, very good about it. And so I lived with my friend, and that was a very healing time for me. All of my clients stayed. And you have to know, these are people who were depending on those checks that were in the account that were being stolen to pay their mortgages, their car notes, their kid fees, all kind of things. So I knew I had to do something, because I did not want to get a full-time job. I just didn't. I didn't want to give up on my dream of working on my agency and building and getting all this stuff paid back and trying to find my way back. And what you have to understand is that I was still very depressed. I was still really struggling with what happened. So I took on a position that many people around me were like, what are you doing? Because I had a couple of advanced degrees. I know that I could have gotten a job. I could have probably done corporate America. I could have done a million different things. But I took this position because I wanted to make cash on hand. I wanted to be able to still function in my business. And I wanted to do whatever I could to kind of get myself back while I was dealing with everything that was around me. But here's the blessing in it. The family is an affluent family that I was a nanny for, actually. The husband was a very affluent businessman. And I told him all what happened. And he literally poured into me. He mentored me. He helped me. He gave me such great insight that I would have never gained had I went and worked for someone else. And despite what some people around me were like, no, don't do that, don't do that. It, for me, was a very healing time for me. I went and I worked there. I actually worked 2 retail jobs in between all of that. And then when I would get home, I would eat and shower. And while the house went to sleep, I stayed up. I don't think I slept very much, to be honest with you, for quite some time. I realized a couple things. This person took everything from me in many ways. Every ounce of income I had, they took away a lot of my self-esteem because I felt like, how could I let this happen? I just went through a lot of mental struggle, but the one thing that they couldn't take from me was the activity of my hands and my mind. I was still very creative. I still had business ideas. I still understood how to kind of put things back together, if you will. So every night I was on the computer and I was emailing schools and groups and everything and booking my speakers. And by God's grace, I was booking clients and getting my clients back out there. And in the midst of that, I was paying off all the different things that I need to pay off the different speakers whose income was obviously in the accounts. And as well as trying to fight all the stuff that the checks that were still coming in, because you got to understand, I'm over here needing to make sure I take care of my clients, take care of myself. And it took about a few months for the checks to stop coming in, okay? And I had to fight off all the different merchants and let them know identity theft, which is seriously one of the most painful things you can go through. But I learned so much in this situation because in the 7 months I lived with my friend, I realized something, that people can't take away your purpose. They can't take away your gift. They can't take away your talents. No matter what they try to do, if they try to steal from you, if they try to rob you in different ways, whatever people try to do, they can't take that from you. It's what you choose to do with what's in you, because that's the one thing that she could never steal from me. And I'm going to tell you, it was not easy. There were many times when I literally drove to the family's house. I was crying on the way there, crying on the way back, shook it off, and every day it kept getting a little bit better. I cried a little bit less. I found ways to fill my own cup up. I found ways to keep being inspired. And even when I couldn't afford to go to luncheons and things back then, social media was not an issue. It wasn't even really present. I knew I needed to get out there and network in between all the things that I was doing. So what I did, because I didn't have a lot of income because it was going to pay back and do certain things, I would go to luncheon and different meetups. And when I would ask them if I could serve on the committee, if I can serve as their marketing chair, because that gave me a chance to not have to pay, so I can be there. I can actually lend my talent to help out in any way that I could. I had access to the member roster. And in doing those different kind of things and being creative with what I could use that didn't have to deal with income at the time, I was able to generate a lot more clientele. I was able to rebuild. I was able to fight my way back. And in 7 months, I was able to move out and I got my first home. So that was a really cool thing. And I literally became a different person. I changed my entire business model. I changed the scope of how I approach people. I even changed how I do my financials. I changed everything about myself because, as I shared, no one can strip you of what you're meant to be. They just can't, no matter how hard they may try. And even in all that I dealt with, in everything that I felt, all of the depression, I had periods of self-loathing because I kept thinking, how could I have let this happen? All the different things that I went through was needed for me to become stronger mentally. It was become stronger in terms of how I approach my working relationships. It made me way savvier in my business finances. I knew everything. I made sure no one ever going forward when I paid people, if it was by wire or it was by cashier's check. It was little things like that that taught me so much. So I just want to encourage you, if you're listening to this and you've gone through something where you feel like whether someone is taking your peace, maybe they've taken something materialistic from you, whether people are challenging whether you should do this, that, and the other, or not in agreement that you're out there pursuing your dreams and they want you to work or do certain things that they feel like you should do. I would challenge you to really and truly stay true to what you feel is best for you. I would challenge you to know that if you don't have all the resources around you, you have the activity of your mind. You have the activity of the internet now. I didn't have that before in the same ways that we have it now, but you can research, you can learn. There's no reason, no excuses why you can't self-teach yourself things that you need to learn. And then from there, figure out a plan. Put something together, whether that is the first step is to really evaluate what you can step into first. Because like for me, I knew the first thing I needed to do obviously was to get the situation rectified with everyone. So my first plan of action was email, meeting planners so I can get their names out there. And I did that for literally 3 to 4 hours every single day. I committed to that. That was my first action step, is to commit 3 to 4 hours every day without fail, 7 days a week, to make sure that I seeded opportunities for people around me, and those things took crop. The second thing is once I started doing that, and that was really starting to generate really great clientele, I went over here and said, how can I get out and meet people? I needed to start being around people. I needed to start marketing again so that I can kind of rebuild my own confidence again in what it is I can do. And so I did that. I started to become more creative in how I approached building my market. So that was like my next step. And then my third step was revamping my entire business model so that way, once I got this resolved, I had this area growing. Then I looked at my structure and I was able to rebuild in that way. And then in between all of that, the connective web was I worked on Kim. I made sure that I was gentle with myself. I made sure I felt everything I needed to feel. If I felt sad, I went into that feeling. If I felt excited, I celebrated every single win. Every time I closed a contract, I went out and did something for myself, or my friend and I went out and did something. I made sure that I celebrated my wins. And as I was doing all these different little pieces, they started to really build more in me. They helped me become stronger. It helped me to rebuild everything that became my new foundation for which I built my company on. So I just want to encourage you to never lose sight of what is in you.